Alright guys, so before this actually starts, I should note that this was something that was supposed to come out like months ago, probably a little bit after the little Ace gimmick one I did, but because I was busier than normal and that I was losing motivation for this specifically, slower and slower by the time, I sort of just backtracked on it. So if it feels a little half-baked and I don't have that new mojo, feels a little lazier, yada yada yada, then that's on me. I'm sorry, my bad. But if not, then I guess you could just forget everything I just said here. But I think that is it. So yeah, I'm just gonna transition into the real beginning. Alright guys, when it comes to team building, everyone turns to Ash Ketchum, and for good reason. Not only is the potential the most fun to investigate, but the concept of an ultimate team just sounds really cool. The sad part is that all of that effort is usually never applied to the other main characters. However, instead of talking about your everyday main character, let's talk about one that belongs under a certain niche of characters. That is the children. Well, the little children. What's so awesome about them is that there's a lingering trait that revolves around these little squirts. Because Ash is something of a starting point of when trainers can have Pokemon, that obviously means anyone younger than him by a year or more are unqualified to be trainers. Except when they are? Yeah, there's weird cases when the littler kids, for some reason, are trainers, but ignore that plot hole. The topic of today is to take a look into the original concept of this trope, aka Max. From the beginning, and technically still now, the concept of wanting Pokemon was one of his biggest traits. From having role models, to befriending some, and even borrowing a few from his friends, I think the possibilities are endless. So, without stalling any longer, let's get started.
Pokemon, get to the
So, starting off with the first Pokemon, we have Skarmory. And to get something out of the way, there will be a teensy bit of inspiration from other trainers. As a character, Max was someone who was really eager to be a trainer despite his age, so he gathered a few role models. Other than his dad being a gym leader, the main ones to think about were Ash and May. And despite not having a significant interaction in their meeting, I believe Max will share an appreciation for Steven Stone. What does this have to do with Skarmory? Well, I doubt Max will just pick one just because Steven has one as well, but I think it'd be a good nod towards the trainer. Think of how Ash and Iris looked up to Cynthia and both got a gibble by pure coincidence. As to why it's Skarmory, honestly, it was one of the last Pokemon when I made this team, and the only one from Steven's team that I thought would be aesthetically compatible. As for his role, he'll just be the bird of the team, filling up that missing slot of aerial support, but also a stereotypical trainer and Pokemon bond with Max. There's not much else to say, so I'll just leave the other details up to you. As for the second Pokemon to list down, we have Banette. This one is inspired by one of the few Pokemon Max had any bond with. And for the record, it isn't the same one that he befriended because I don't know about you, but I forgot this little guy had a close bond with another trainer. Nonetheless, the inspiration still exists. Nothing more, nothing less, but how about we talk about Banette's other traits? Oh, and since I didn't want to drag Skarmory section on longer than it needed to, I'd say right now that its battle style specializes in a mastery of aerial combat and high defense. Banette is a definitive opposite, focusing on tricky attacks with varying effects and tricky defense with his ghost-like body. Think of Ash's Gengar with a similar moveset in mind. Moves with status effects like a Will-O-Wisp or just an extremely varied move pool overall would add uniqueness to the team. Switching topics, and because Banette is a ghost type, a cheery and mischievous character would be very befitting. Generic sure, but when you get to see the rest of the team, you'll see how Banette is sort of the oddball amongst the group. And as of now, that's all I can really say about Banette, so let's get to the third member, shall we? The third Pokemon in question is rather iconic to one of his family members, and that is the ace Pokemon of his father, aka Slaking. And even though this is supposed to be an homage to someone else like Skarmory, hear me out. Because Max wasn't old enough to be a trainer, moments that were brought up occasionally had to do with what he wanted, especially his first. And to save that third starter conversation for later, one of the ones he imagined getting at first was a Slakoth, gifted from his dad. While initially against the idea of having one, by the time Diamond and Pearl came along, he seems to be very caring of the evolutionary line. It's kind of hard to think of any particular plot points surrounding Slaking, but I do think it'd be someone that fits right in with the rest of the team. But let's not end things too soon, and the last thing to talk about is its battle style. To take a page from Sawyer's book, his Slaking prioritizes in high endurance to make up for its truant ability and attacks when the moment is right. Afterwards, it heals up with recovery moves like Rest or its signature, Slack Off. Putting all of the pieces together, Slaking is just a befitting member in Max's team. I don't know what else to say. Starting off with the second half of the team, we have Mightyena. Now, just like Banette being based off of someone Max befriended, the same applies here. This guy was also one of the first ones to ever be friends with Max during the advanced generation, and since that specific one is also belonging to someone else, the one on this team will suffice as a reference, just like Banette. And because Mightyena is an earlier route Pokemon, I think it could be one of his first captures, making it one of Max's closest Pokemon. Outside of backstory, its personality can be something of the reliable old dog type, similar to Ash's Liking Rock for example. This reliability can also apply to battles, and while I'd want most of the team to be equally successful, Mightyena in my head would be someone that would never let you down. No jobbing, just good results from beginning to end. The most loyal and determined dog there is. And to be honest, there's not much left I can say about Mightyena. Just a Pokemon that fits really well with both Max and the team itself. Up on the list is the fifth member, which will actually be a starter, being, drumroll please, Swampert. Before there's any potential pitchforks, the original and obvious choice was gonna be Sceptile, since Max has already stated who I wanted a Trico. Except here, I wanted to review the other options to be fair. There's Blaziken, who I thought could be some way of following May's footsteps, but I thought this to be a bit boring. And there's Sceptile, who could be a way of inspiration towards Ash, but I found that unoriginal. This is where I came across Swampert, because this guy would be the ultimate subversion of expectations, by having Max walk his own path separate from Ash and May. But even though the Mudkip line is a starter, this one won't hail from the lab. Like a majority of the starters belonging to the main characters, this guy will be just one of the ones you can just find in the wild. Anyways, what would make Swampert a unique member is the variety of moves. Unlike most Pokemon where theirs is signaturized by its typing, Swampert can have a vast array of typing in their arsenal similar to Ash's Crocodile. And similar to Mightyena, it'll be one of the first Max owns along the journey, so their bond will be tremendously close. Swampert may not be the most welcome in terms of concept, but I think this guy could easily make it up in execution. But now here's what you all have been waiting for, the final member. And if you know anything about Max's character, there's only one Pokemon left for interpretation. The final Pokemon for Max's team will be Ralt, eventually turned Gallade. This was one of the definitive slots for this team, as nearly every other Pokemon that Max befriended already belonged to someone else. As we all know, back in the advanced generation, this Ralts was not only a wild one, but someone promised to reunite with Max. Now, from what I've seen from some sources, it said that Ralts would be Max's soon-to-be starter, and I didn't really see any confirmation within the episode. However, I like to think that Ralts magically teleported in front of his front porch or something once he started his journey. As for its combat options, the moves don't require much imagination. You know, a couple of blade moves like Psycho Cut or Night Slash, but also a status move like Sword Stance to give it a powerhouse kind of style. And similar to almost every trainer's first Pokemon, Gallade would be the main ace of the team. As for a Gallade, I really wanted to follow the Wally route in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Because the two characters hailed from Gen 3, Carnivore was the only final evolution at the time. But since Gen 4 and the introduction of Gallade, this gave a more masculine aesthetic rather than the initial feminine route the Ralts line had. Overall, I think Gallade is practically the perfect Pokemon for Max. And now that this team is finished, I actually wanted to discuss one thing that I think would be really interesting, and that is Mega Evolution. I didn't think this concept would have some crazy character arc or anything, so I saved this topic at the end. Something I really thought would be a cool idea is for Max to have multiple of his Pokemon to Mega Evolve, similar to how Ash changes his Z crystals. This would be a way for Max to have more strategy on how he wants to go all out. My headcanon would be that Max has them located in his glasses, since that's his most memorable part of his design, but that's kinda it. Overall, this team is really good in my opinion. And if you haven't seen the team building stuff I made prior, these are all based on aesthetics for the character, not competitive viability. And since I didn't want to drag this ending on longer than it needed to be, I'll just leave things here. But that's pretty much all I got for now. Yep.